So yesterday we were talking about Nicole Eggert and this lawsuit. I don't know if she's filed a lawsuit. She's just making accusations.
No, she has.
Right now. Okay, she is. She has filed charges with the police department. That's what the story was yesterday against Charles in Charge.
And these are sexual molestation charges that stem back to a 3-year period in the 80s. I believe it was from 84 to 87 is what it was.
So 30 years ago.
30 plus.
30 plus years ago against Scott Baio. And he said, that, they did have a relationship, but it wasn't when she claims it was after that. And she was the one that kind of egged it on. And we got Jeff Stulberg here, StulbergLaw.com. He practices down in San Luis Obispo. He's a personal injury criminal defense lawyer. He also does general business law and civil litigation. But Jeff, when we talk about statute of limitations and this is an assault case?
Let's separate. The statute of limitations it varies for each type of offense or civil case, and it's what the law says is that there's an amount of time within which certain types of claims ought to be brought, because after that it creates proof problems and it becomes unfair to one person or the other. Like, for example, in a civil case, statute of limitations are set so that people don't have to worry about something that happens following them forever. In other words, if you run somebody over in a car, if they're going to claim they're going to get hurt and you're not a governmental entity, you're just a private Joe in your own car, they've got to sue you within 2 years. And or in a wrongful death case, there's statutes of limitations for that. If you're going to sue a healthcare provider for negligence arising out of rendition of professional services, there's a statute for that. If you want to sue any kind of governmental entity, much shorter. There's statutes of limitations on the criminal side too for certain types of cases. Most in the Nicole Eggers issue, I understand that the claim, I haven't looked into it carefully, but I think that it was statutory rape. In other words, that he didn't forcibly rape her, but
it was consensual, but she was under 18.
Under 18. That is generally a misdemeanor in California. And so the statute of limitations for most misdemeanors is 1 year.
Oh, okay. So she's 29, 30, right. 31 years too late.
That doesn't mean necessarily that she can't sue him civilly.
Okay, Jeff.
Under a delayed theory. But the other, and there might be an issue on the statute of limitations for that too, because it might be deemed that she had a period of time from her 18th birthday within which to file. I'd have to look up that specific statute.
But what did she file, by the way? Or did she file charges? What was it that happened legally yesterday?
She filed a police report.
She filed a police report. Okay.
But then it sounds like she's doing this in steps for positioning herself for a civil suit because her brother, Alexander Polinsky, he played her brother on the show.
Yeah.
He is backing up her claims, so he would be like a witness in the thing.
Sure.
And what would police be able to do 32 years after the case?
It depends.
If there's no proof.
Well, it depends. For example, on a forcible case, in 2000, there used to be, for most felonies, there's a statute of limitations. It's accepted for murder and other things, but because you hear about cold cases where murderers are caught on DNA years later. But with regard to issues of forcible rape and crimes of that nature, in 2016, Governor Brown signed a bill in California saying there is no statute of limitations on those types of offenses any longer. And so what you have to look at is what's charged, and then go back and look at the specifically enumerated statute for that charge.
Yeah, she's been talking a lot about it this week. She did an interview.
15 years old, standing on the bridge over the LA River, and I looked down at that dry riverbed. I'm sobbing, and I looked at it, and then I was like, and I said to myself, it's not a legit bridge. You're not going to die. You're going to break a lot of bones, and you're not even going to kill yourself. Get home, and then crying even harder because I'm like, you idiot. What were you just thinking?
The way she tells that story, I mean, she's talking about, she wanted to jump off this bridge and kill herself. But then by laughing about it, I don't know if I take it that serious.
Well, but actually, if you've spent time in L.A. where I grew up and the LA River, which is just a big cement washway to take rainwater out to the deal.
With it. Yeah, I've seen Greece.
Most of the falls are about 20 feet, so she's probably right. You probably break a couple legs and maybe crack a couple ribs, and then you'd be there moaning instead of, which is probably better than taking your own life. But her reasoning is actually sort of rings like something that somebody could have actually thought.
Now,
sure.
So this is probably more set up for a civil case then. It's kind of what we're...
Listen to the statement that the brother from the show, Alexander Polinsky, said. He said, working on the set of Charles in Charge from the age of 11 to 15 was no picnic. It was a toxic environment. I witnessed Scott Baio acting inappropriate towards Nicole Eggert during my first year of working on the show. I walked in on them together behind the scenes when she was clearly under the age of 18 because this was the first year of the show. And Nicole was on Scott's lap and he did not appreciate my intrusion. He yelled at me and called me various homophobic slurs. Then I left the room. She claims that 10 other witnesses have made statements in support of his comments, her comments. She says she was physically abused when she told Scott Baio that she was no longer interested in him, that she wanted to date boys her own age, and then he abused her, like he hit her, and people on the set knew about this taking place, but nobody said anything at the time. So, but they could be all called into witness. I mean, is this kind of shaping up, and just what I'm giving you right here, Jeff, is a civil case? Does this sound like it's got, I mean, some legs?
Well, the answer is it depends. If you go back to like the cleric molestations, going back to the Catholic Church and other deals where people sort of repress it and then it comes out later in life, all of a sudden they're having trouble with relationships and they're abusing drugs and alcohol and they go into therapy and boom, this comes out. Mm-hmm. There's an extension of the statute of limitations for civil claims in those types of cases. But in cases where you actually know what's going on and you're talking about it and you're telling people, I can't believe that weirdo did that. In that case back then, the statute might have been on those types of civil claims arising from that a year from her 18th birthday. But again, you have to look at every case is very, very, very fact specific. Now, if given their age difference at the time and what some of what she's talking about alleges, there could very well be an extended felony statute of limitations. So on the criminal side. And if that's the case, sometimes the civil statute can be extended as well. Again, there's a whole line of cases that talk about when the statute's extended and when it begins to run in these types of cases, and they're all fact specific. In other words, what happens is somebody some attorney like me files a lawsuit on behalf of somebody that's been molested, and the defense attorney always, if it's older than a couple years, always files a legal challenge based upon the statute of limitations. And then one of two things happens. There's either undisputed facts upon which a judge can determine that the statute was or was not told.
Gotcha.
Or if the facts are really disputed, a judge will determine, hey, this is a question of fact for a jury to decide, and they'll let the whole thing go to the jury, including a determination on the statute of limitations. And in some cases, I've had cases in my 30 years in practice where the statute of limitations has actually been bifurcated or peeled off from a determination of whether the underlying case had merit or not. And what we have done is the court has obliged us to try the statute of limitations issue first, determine that the statute had not run, and then go forward with a trial on the merits.
So she can get all these people to come forward, and she's got all this evidence and witnesses and other things. I mean, that's probably that is probably one way that this will actually see the light of day.
Well, unless after she turns 18, there's a bunch of evidence that these folks were talking about this stuff all the time,
right,
and yet she didn't bring a civil claim. That's why I'm saying they're very fact specific. These witnesses that are talking now saying, "Oh, I knew all about it," and and I'm sorry I didn't say anything. If they didn't say anything about it back then or discuss it with them, it potentially creates a different scenario. That's why when somebody calls me about a case, especially if it's close to the statute of limitations or there's an issue about it, we sit down and we have a very long discussion about what the very specific facts are, because one fact can change everything.
That is Jeff Stulberg. StulbergLaw.com is his website. Our phone numbers in studio are 543-3693. You can call or text in.
I had somebody call me about a week ago that had they'd been hurt very badly in an accident, and no question about it. And they call me up and they say, the insurance company's been stringing me along for blah, 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 blah. And so what was the day of the accident? Well, there was a 2-year statute of limitations on that claim, and she called me 2 years and 3 days after the incident. The statute had run, so the insurance company had led her along down the primrose path right up until she had no claim.
So is there any case there because the way they led her down the road?
No. You're supposed to know what it is.
Due diligence, yeah.
Yeah, there is. And what they do is early on, when they're jerking you around, they put in the fine print of some letter, by the way, your statute of limitations runs on X date. And as long as they do that buried in the middle of something else, it's not told. I actually did have a case a number of years ago, medical malpractice case that was published in the Court of Appeals where they alleged violation of the statute of limitations, but they never advised my client that there was an applicable statute, and because they were paying his medical bills, led him to believe that they would take care of everything. And so the statute in that case was deemed told, and they had to pay, significant six-figure amount. But it's different. Every case is different.
Insurance companies. I mean, this is why you need to call Jeff if you find yourself in a situation. Ever since we met you, it's
insurance companies.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you've opened our eyes to, and I realize that they're a business and there's a reason they're a big
necessary
business.
evil. I mean, if you've got a house, you have to insure it because most people, if your house burns down, you can't write a check to rebuild it.
Right. If you're in a car, obviously it's a law. You have to have insurance. But you're in an accident.
Having the right kind
you need to contact somebody like Jeff because if you get into an accident, and I talked to you about my stepdad's accident.
Right.
He was able to get through all that, but they were kind of jerking him around, and
he was fortunate too because besides the insurance that the at-fault driver had, who was a kid, he had a good underinsured motorist policy himself, which made up a big difference. It made a significant six-figure difference in the amount of recovery he had, which still wasn't enough given the fact that he busted almost every bone in his body.
And because of you, they found a good attorney and in Washington State, live in another state, and were able to actually get a little bit off the uncle's. This kid was staying with his uncle out of his homeowner's insurance because that's where the kid was apparently drinking at. There's just all kinds of different ways that this can go and different paths it can take that, you're just not going to know unless you are an attorney. But anyways, so StulbergLaw.com, and that's 544-7693. Lenny Dykstra may be crazier than Charlie Sheen. Now, obviously, we know Charlie's a big baseball fan.
That's a competition.
Right? Yeah. We all know Charlie Sheen's a huge baseball fan. And that's probably the only thing normal about the guy with his tiger's blood and his hookers and his porn stars.
I have a 10,000-year-old brain and the boogers of a 7-year-old.
Right. And stuff like that. But
there you go.
Dykstra, who just got out of prison, is doing a tell-all book or whatever. And he went to talk to Sheen about his former and ex-assistant friend and Rick Calamaro. And he went and talked to Sheen about it, and he said that Sheen told him that he killed him.
Had him killed.
He didn't say he killed him.
Had him killed.
He says, "You mean dead Rick?"
Had him juiced.
And he says, "What happened?" He says, "Oh, you mean?" He says that he said, "Well, he was trying to blackmail me, and I had him effing iced." It's apparently this guy Rick, who was the friend and the ex-assistant.
I'm a high priest, Vatican assassin, and warlock
of Dykstra.
High credibility there.
Was found dead with lethal amounts of the opiate fentanyl, which is, if you watch Live PD, they're putting gloves on. Like, this stuff's very dangerous. It can get on your hands and it can make you very sick, if not kill you. So, anyways, there's no proof. He has no proof of this except for this, the
conversation.
Sheen said he iced him or whatever because he was trying to blackmail him.
He says Sheen said he.
Yes, that's all he said, that there's no proof there. But the statute of limitation on murder is zero. I mean, there is no statute.
Statute of limitations, that's why they have all these great TV shows like Cold Case. Because the statute of limitations in virtually every state in the union for murder or conspiracy to commit murder for hire is unlimited.
So that means it never runs out.
And so, I mean, theoretically,
there is no statute.
Theoretically, Lenny Dykstra's statements could get people sniffing around to find out,
or could just draw more attention to the fact that he's writing a book and
here's a better
get the book.
Yeah, that's true.
There's always been a cold case question regarding the death of Natalie Wood.
Yeah.
And recently, some witness or witnesses came forward and made some new statements about the evening that Natalie Wood died, people that were on the boat and other people that knew her that have caused the LAPD to reopen that investigation.
Who was her husband at the time? What was his name?
Robert Wagner.
Robert
Wagner, who's like 98 now or 88, something like
that.
I
think he's 88. Yeah.
88, almost 90.
And now that he's a person of interest again, is what I
Right, they're not saying he's a suspect, but he's a person of interest.
Yeah, which means
once again, but he's lived his whole life a person of interest in this case.
To some extent,
ever since she's died. But still.
But that's a clearer example of where the statute of limitations there is now.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe we'll find out more on his deathbed. He's getting up there. But the statute of limitations, as far as if someone has done you wrong and you want to sue them, is 1 year.
No, it depends. That's why I was saying that. If you're, for example, for certain types of governmental entities, like a community health center or a school district or City of San Luis Obispo, County of Santa Barbara, whatever. It's 6 months. United States of America is 6 months, and there's a claim statute process that you have to go through to perfect that claim. In other words, you have to give whatever the governmental entity is, you have to give them get permission from them to sue them.
Okay.
And there's a process you have to go through, and that has to be done within 6 months. Certain types of claims, for example, like wrongful termination in violation of public policy, are a year. Certain types of personal injury cases go as long as 2 years. Even in contracts, business contracts, there's a statute of limitations for oral agreements, and there's a statute of limitations for written agreements, and then there's also statutes that apply to things like purchase and sale of real property that can be different. And that's why if you have a question about something like that, you're always best to ask early so that you know what your time limitations are. Above and beyond that, let's just say that somebody had a bad fall. Let's say that they were in a supermarket, and there was a tile that came up,
right,
and they caught their foot on a tile that came up. They went down and hurt themselves, or they just walked out in shame at the time and didn't say anything about it because they thought, I'm okay. And then they find out later that they've got a problem. Well, if they wait until the end of the statute of limitations to all of a sudden bring that claim, it's going to be treated with a huge degree of skepticism by the defendant and the defendant's insurer, because we didn't even know about that. They call them blind claims. And so I always tell people that if you have a viable claim, that the more quickly or the closer in proximity to the event that the person who might be responsible is placed on notice, the more credibility it's going to be dealt with, and the more likely you are to get a favorable outcome.
So, I think what we could take away from this is if something happens to you, even if you're not thinking you're going to sue somebody, never hurts to call somebody like Jeff.
If for no other reason than to know how much time he got.
Yeah, just to give it an idea what your situation is, because you never know when that insurance company is going to cut you off. This happened to my wife's mother, my mother-in-law. She worked at a big store. She slipped in some water and in the break room, and that somebody had spilt, not cleaned up. She tore a bunch of muscles. They told her she had to come back. She missed 2 days. They're like, you need to get your job. You got to come back. Anyways, now she's got an attorney and the whole thing. But she wasn't going to do anything. And if they would have just helped her out with her situation as far as medical goes, but now it's turned into a pretty ugly thing. So you just never know what's going to go your way. StulbergLaw.com. You can also call Jeff at 544-7693. Great to see you as always. Thanks for getting it cleared up for us.
Thanks for having me. Fun topics this week.
Good morning. Jeff and Jeremy in the morning on 93.3 KZOZ.